Hi, I'm Gareth.
Hi, I'm Alex.
And welcome to this rather special video in which we're going to be answering your questions. We've kind of put out feelers asking you to pose any questions you wanted to, and we've been sifting through them all. We've had so many questions, it's unbelievable. Overwhelming response, for which many thanks. And we've had questions about all sorts of topics from all over the world. So it just kind of makes us even more aware than we were that this is now very much a global musical community. And as we've gone through all the very many questions, we've tried to sort of sort them into groups, into sort of topics. Some of the questions we're not going to take during this video because we've realised that actually the question is inviting us to make a special video for the YouTube channel. Other questions are really inviting us to think about making a course that we could run. So don't worry if your question is not answered, we're not ignoring you. We've actually sorted out these things into these various categories. But just by organising into topics, hopefully it will make it a little bit easier to find a path through the kind of topics that people have been asking about. And we very much want to respond to the questions that you have asked. Well, we've had many questions asking us about our kind of life stories and our professional journeys. So, Alex, do you want to say something about where you've come from and how you've got to today?
Well, I remember kind of when I was back at school, effectively, or when I was a child, actually, or something like that, to be fair. I never really even thought I kind of liked music, I think, something like that, which seems a bit strange now.
That's fascinating,
I think what it was I'd be like in the car with my mum, my sister or something like that, and they'd have the radio on or some bits of music, and I just sort of thought, I don't really like any of this that's on, so I just never thought I was into it, actually. And I remember it was perhaps like late primary school or early secondary school. I used to play a game online called Age of Empires, which was like a strategy game or something like that. And they had lots of sort of websites that were set up for top players or something. And I remember visiting one specifically, and it kind of had this background music or something like that. And the background music, it's a bit of a joke now. It's by someone called Darude and Sunstone, which you may know, but it's certainly a bit of a meme online. But that kind of, that track kind of is, I've got good memories of it almost, that makes sense, because I remember going to that website. It was a terrible website. And just thinking, what is this piece of music like? Why does this sound so good? Why do I like this? And that was kind of when I first sort of found a pleasing sound to my ear, if that makes sense, actually. In fact, you can't quite see it, or maybe you can, but I've got a sort of a print of the actual track just behind on the studio or something like that. That's how dear it is to me.
I've always wondered what that is.
That's what it is. And then it was kind of after that, I started doing music at primary school and sort of got into it a bit later on in secondary school. And we had music classes, and I found it interesting, effectively. And I found that it was sort of something that came a bit more naturally and something like that. I like doing something practical. But it was also quite academic as well. And I really liked the writing side, and probably more of the electronic side to begin with and stuff like that. I certainly like the technology and like the electronic music. So I kind of started building a little home studio just with a computer and writing some stuff at home. And it kind of went from there, actually. I sort of I got a keyboard, a Roland Juno D synthesizer, which kind of did its job at the time. It had some good sounds on. I enjoyed playing that. And I learned kind of how to sequence in Cubasis, I think it was called, and Logic. And I remember my teacher coming from school, and he'd sort of show me bits how to set up and stuff like that. And eventually it built up, and I kind of thought to myself, near where I chose my GCSEs, this is sort of what I think I want to do, effectively. And that kind of came on the process to myself. I thought, right, if I'm going to do this sort of live, I need to make sure I can sort of perform this stuff live. So I need to be good at playing or something like that. And I need to know sort of what I'm doing and take it a bit more seriously. And that was when I sort of had some piano lessons at school, some keyboard lessons, but I wouldn't say they were as good as when I came to Gareth, effectively, something like that. Because that's how we sort of first met.
It is, isn't it? And it's many years ago now.
Yeah, yes, it is.
About half a lifetime ago for you, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it probably is about 14, 15 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's been a long time, but it's been a good time as well. So I kind of came to you and sort of said, I'm thinking about doing music later.
Yeah.
I'd like to learn the piano. And it sort of went from there. I never knew that you could do grades, effectively, something like that. And you sort of said, you might need to be doing some grades, that sort of thing. Yes. I just thought kind of you were as good as you could be. And, if you were that good, then that was fine. There was no grade 1, 2, 3 and so on. So we kind of worked through all that sort of stuff. We raced through my grades and took a bit of a gap year just before I went to university. I did my grade 8 piano. And then at university, I didn't do more traditional music. I enjoyed playing all the classical stuff and everything like that and doing all the theory. I think it's really fascinating. But I was certainly more interested in kind of music technology. So my degree, and kind of a bit more perhaps my profession sort of thing like that, is on the music technology side. Sometimes the writing, a lot of kind of setting up and recording and sound and audio and recording orchestras, recording pianos and all that sort of thing really. So
but you're a modest guy, aren't you? 'Cause, I remember when you first came to me and I thought, wow, this guy's going to start learning the piano properly at this stage.
It was a bit later than perhaps normal, wasn't it?
Probably later than many would, And you just flew through it. You made incredible progress very quickly. And then, here you are, professional diploma holder.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, after the university, did I studied a bit for my diploma and stuff like that. And we got that. That was in 2019, so that was a good thing to do. I was glad it was done.
Big project, wasn't it? Yeah.
It was. So, that's kind of, I guess, what I'd say is my life story.
Yeah.
But, what about yours?
A bit
longer of us.
I was going to say, the trouble is my life is twice as long as his. But I was born in London, and when I was still fairly young, as a family, we moved to the north of England, and that's when I first started learning the piano. So quite a bit younger. I think I was about 4 when I started learning the piano. And I remember my first teacher, I thought she was about 150 years old. She was probably younger than I am now, but that's how it is when you're full. And she was one of the old school, and she had a big stick next to the piano. So if you played a wrong note, out came the stick across the back of the fingers. These days it's called child abuse, but back then it was kind of perfectly normal teaching practice. But she was a great incentive because it was a kind of learn by fear. Because I went along thinking I mustn't play any wrong notes because the stick's going to come out.
I suppose it works.
So it works. Whether it's kind of absolutely sort of in touch with current practice is a bit debatable, but that's how it was. So so I started with her. But my father was a professional musician. And I think at a very early stage, I think I moved away from the ancient lady with a stick and started learning with my father. And people often say, you can't be taught by a parent. But actually, in my case, I think it worked really well. And I was just so lucky because in a way, maybe music was in the genes because of that. But I just had this kind of on-tap resource at home all the time. It could supervise my practice and teach me and get going. So that gave me a fantastic start, really. And then when I was 7, we moved back to the south of England. I think my father got a new job. And the music kind of went on from there. Just went to an ordinary local state school, but went to the Royal College of Music as a junior. So I used to spend my Saturdays up there. And that was terrific stuff because the high school I was in had very limited music, let's put it that way anyway. But going to the Royal College of Music, suddenly I'm surrounded by all these other sort of geeks, same age as me, all heavily into their music. And so great teaching, piano teaching, organ teaching, theory, history of music, great ensembles, orchestras, chamber music, all sorts of things. So that was terrific, really. So that really moved the music on for me. And then when I'd finished my kind the schooling years, I was lucky enough to get a place to go to Oxford University. And just before I went, an opportunity came up for me to spend a year at St Paul's Cathedral. So St Paul's Cathedral in London. So off I trekked at the age of 18, feeling, my goodness me, this is great big cathedral, this massive organ that
Quite well reviewed.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And this huge organ with 5 keyboards, and actually the number of pipes and stops and everything made it bigger than 5 keyboards. It was just that some of it was shared. And I'd been the organist in a local church with this little organ that just had this 11 different stops, and suddenly there's this huge beast there. But it was a really kind of formative year for me. It was kind of sort of baptism of fire in a way. Learn your
So how
learn
did
your
you get
trade.
that then, actually? Then?
Well, they were looking for an organ scholar, and they sometimes have one organ scholar, sometimes have 2. So I went as the junior organ scholar, and there was another guy who was the senior organ scholar who finished his university time. So I was the kind of little kid on the block, really. But you have to get up to speed very quickly, and just observing these fantastic musicians at work and having to play and direct the choir and all the rest of it kind of was a brilliant way to learn my trade, really. So I had a year at St Paul's, and then I went up to Oxford, was organ scholar at Worcester College, Oxford, and again, fantastic teaching, great opportunity to play, direct choirs, did all sorts of exciting things as well, like conducted orchestra, and fantastic stuff. From Oxford, I went down to Canterbury for a short time.
Trying to remember it.
I'm trying to get the order of this right. Yeah, it's just called senility. Yeah. So I went down to Canterbury Cathedral and did a short spell down there. Again, same kind of thing at the cathedral and some teaching as well. And the first permanent job that came my way was in Wakefield, back in the north of England. And in fact, I have to admit, I had to get the map out to find out where Wakefield was because I wasn't entirely sure. And I remember coming up to Wakefield for the interview on the train, and it was a kind of wet, miserable November day, and just looking at all these slag heaps, piles of coal from the old mines, thinking, my goodness, this is a bit bleak. So anyway, and I thought, well, if I do get the job, I'm not going to be staying here for very long. And I'm still in Yorkshire all these years later, but that's how it goes, isn't it? So anyway, they gave me the job, so I was at Wakefield Cathedral for a while, and very much connected with a local grammar school, teaching there as well, and soon ended up being the director of music at the school. And it's fascinating because I left that job 30 years ago, and my youngest son now attends that school. So it's funny how things come back to haunt you. Yeah, absolutely. So I was there until 1990. And since then, I've really operated a freelance career. So it's been a whole mixture of playing and teaching and conducting and examining, adjudicating, all that kind of stuff. And actually, it's the kind of work arena that suits me really well. So, and I'm married to Karen, and I've got 4 wonderful kids, and a rabbit called Norman. And some of you will have met Norman. He's actually appeared on a video singing to you. So have a look at that one. If you've not seen Norman sing, worth a look.
It's all interesting stuff.
So there we are. That's it in a nutshell, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. So what have we got next? Well, kind of like how did we meet, wasn't it? That was the sort of
yes,
thing.
we've sort of
we
done
related
that one.
as well?
Are we He's my older brother. Yeah. Not really. So are we related?
No, I don't think we are, are we?
Not as far as I know.
But how did we meet? That was... Well, that was kind of me coming to you for lessons, effectively, wasn't it? Sort of thing?
Little did we know back then that this is
this
where
all
we'd be
started
with it
off,
all
sort of
today.
thing. I remember my dad kind of scouting out. We sort of thought, oh, this looks a good one. Let's see this one. We came along and, we sort of we sat down. I remember you telling me, because... I had to do the piano quite quick or something like that. You were like, are you sure you might want to play the trumpet or something?
Yeah,
something
might be a bit quicker.
But no, we stuck with the piano.
And I have to say, you made the fastest progress of just about anybody I've ever taught. You raced through it, which is brilliant, fantastic. Yeah.
It was good, actually. Yeah, I enjoyed doing it and stuff like that. Yes, all the time, and and learn. But yeah.
But we're not related to
No,
answer
no.
that question. And then another question that came up that's not too far away from this: how many instruments do you play? Well, how many instruments do you play? You're quite a versatile kind of fellow, aren't you?
Well, yeah. The piano, certainly. I think that's for both of us, obviously.
Yeah.
I've been learning the guitar for a few years. I sometimes have a few like compositional jobs and stuff like that. And I found that a lot of the music that was sort of wanted me to write was kind of guitar-based, sort of folk, sort of singing sort of style. So I thought it might be good if I could actually play a bit of this instead of busking away on the keyboard. So he got me in touch with a teacher. And I sort of sat down a bit, and then I actually decided to learn more classical guitar. I thought it was much more melodic and a bit more interesting, actually, to be fair. So I've been doing that for a bit and kind of been working through the grades and beginning teaching for that really effectively. But that's my thing. Most people probably know you're a pianist, but not probably many know that, or some perhaps know. You're an opus.
I'm a keyboard player, and actually really primarily an organist, but actually I've done so much piano work over the years that it's sort of become a bit sort of dual for me, really. And I've certainly had a go at all sorts of instruments over the years, but I wouldn't claim to play them. I did when I was at school. I hated sport, which is why I've got such an athletic figure. So in order to get out of sport, I learned brass instruments because the brass teacher used to turn up on sports afternoon. So I learnt the trumpet one year, the trombone one year, the tuba another year. So actually, it's been really useful to have that kind of working knowledge of brass. But it wasn't really inspired by a desire to learn brass instruments, but more a desire to get out and do sport. But anyway, was it probably ought to move on? So and sort of another question that came up, several times. Interesting, fascinating to see the kinds of questions that people have been asking. Actually, what is the true value of music to you?
That's a good one, to be fair, actually, yes.
Do you have any thoughts on that one? Or?
I kind of like the creative, practical side and the freedom sort of thing of just being able to kind of almost just write whatever you want sort of thing, in the way you can craft a sound in almost as many possibilities as you can think of. I think it just feels quite free, and it's there's no barrier or something like that in many senses between, I might not speak someone else's language, but you can sort of understand perhaps music on an emotional level or something like that, really, I'd have said. And
music is a kind of language anyway, isn't it, really?
Yes, you're right.
I mean, in terms of sort of work, I mean, for me, it's sort of quite vocational, really. I mean, that's a slightly out-of-date word, I suppose, but the idea that it might be the thing that is the meaning of your life, rather than a job. Or something to do in order to earn money or something, So it's a kind of vocation for me. It's kind of who I am, and so it sits very comfortably. But I mean, I just think music is amazing. Really, this whole sort of notion that music takes over where words leave off. Something many composers have spoken about over the centuries, and it's absolutely true. And also, I mean, you sort of, without trying to depress anybody, I mean, you kind of look at the world, don't you? And you think, oh my goodness, we're in terrible problems, aren't we? With global warming and all sorts of political and military tensions and starvation and I don't know what. And yet, music can lift us out of all of that and put us in another place. And actually, in many ways, put humanity in a place where it was intended to be, really. You can go to a huge arena concert, doesn't matter what the musical style is, and you see people being happy and smiling and hugging each other and being a little bit free to express themselves, And actually, isn't that something that's quite liberating for humanity? It just lifts us out of all this stuff. So, I think there are lots of angles on that question, aren't there?
But that's effectively.
I suppose, a little bit of the value of music to us there as to what that might be about. And that's an interesting question that's related to this. If you hadn't gone into music, what other career would you have considered? I did think about being a ballet dancer, but actually my mother was a ballet dancer, which is quite interesting. But I don't think I've got the figure for it, really. What about you, Alex?
Well, I always liked more practical sort of things, actually. I remember my mum sort of saying to me, like, you seem to suit kind of practical things doing that sort of stuff. So I always like doing stuff. Certainly, music kind of, it's academic in some senses, but a lot of it's practical as well, sort of thing. But I did think about becoming a sort of chef again, or something like that. I quite like cooking sometimes. I quite like baking.
I'll bear that in mind.
Yeah. And I also found like kind of economics quite fascinating as well in some senses, like markets. But I didn't like the kind of business snobbery that was sort of in sometimes that sort of profession. I thought I didn't want to just get involved with that really, but I do kind of find that quite fascinating sometimes as well, sort of thing. So I'd probably said maybe something like that, but I'm glad it was music, to be fair.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because I'm one of the least practical people on the planet. If I try to do some simple task at home, you can guarantee it will go wrong. So I would never have gone down anything of that sort of nature at all, really. But a lot of people said to me, when I finished at Oxford, with an Oxford degree you can go and do law conversion, and probably would have been very sensible, or accountancy or something like that.
Because quite a few musicians probably don't end up with a traditional music job, do they?
And do those kind of conversion things into the professions. But I'm really glad I didn't. With all due respect to those professions, which are wonderful, but it's not for me. And I just know that I'm where I am, and I love it. I quite often travel with the stuff that I do, and you can get on a train in a capital city and look at this sea of faces of people who are just going to the office for another day at work, and I feel really liberated. I don't feel as if I'm in that category at all. I get up most days and I think, great, I'm doing something that I really love doing, whether it's playing or teaching or involved with Music Matters, whatever it is. And it's just exciting to do that. And I love the variety of it. And so, it's definitely the right profession for me. So I think I'll stick with it at this stage.
Sounds wise.
So where are we next? Oh yes, now this is another interesting kind of question and group of question. What have been your most significant musical moments?
You've probably got some good ones to talk about, I think.
I suppose there are lots of things that I could talk about, but of course there's great privilege of being involved in cathedral music. I mean, I've had some great moments there, performances that have just been memorable, and occasions that have been memorable, big occasions and so on. And I've done various bits of work with the BBC over the years as well. And we've had some absolute kind of highlight moments there.
That was on Song of Praise and stuff.
And BBC Religious Broadcasting really sort of maps into my background in the sort of church and cathedral world. So and there's a whole variety of programmes that go out there. So I spent quite a few years working with them, and some real highlight moments with them. So I suppose those sort of significant things, and maybe other things as well that were musical highlights, but also had a kind of wider significance. And I remember quite a few years ago now going out to Singapore with a colleague, and we worked with this choir for 10 days, and at the end of it they put on this concert in their main concert hall. And in the event, I played the organ for the concert. And so they had a rehearsal every night. So all these people have been to work all day, and it's sort of stiflingly hot and sticky. And they came to this long rehearsal every evening, and they worked their socks off. It was fantastic. And the standard was sort of reasonable when it started, and it just got better and better and better as we went through these rehearsals. And then we did this concert. So musically, that was a really kind of engaging thing to do with some really committed sort of amateur musicians. But it had a wider purpose because they were trying to raise money to build a geriatric wing on the hospital there. And the whole project achieved the goal.
Oh, that's good.
So at the end of all that, you go out for a couple of weeks, you get on the plane, you think, well, all that's been achieved musically, and there's other fantastic things being achieved as well, And so I look back on things like that and think, wow, what a privilege and what a significant moment in which to be involved, really. So it's not just sort of personal significance, I suppose. It's that thing that happens with music often. It's something of wider significance as well.
It's like people students passing their exams.
Absolutely.
Like that It's always a good moment.
So what about for you? I mean, that's one of them, I suppose.
It certainly is. You're right. That sort of mutual satisfaction sort of thing. But I think certainly when I got my diploma, that was kind of a big one for me, something like that, because I never really wanted to be a concert pianist or anything like that. And we decided to do that sort of thing, and I enjoyed doing it, sort of stuff. And I felt it was really good to do, and I'm glad I got it. So that's certainly what I'd say is a significant musical moment for me, effectively kind of achieving that. And then sort of when I used to write music, it was always, is it going to be good enough for anything like that one day? And kind of I just thought, right, this is my track, and I'm going to send it to a record label, and they wanted to sort of sign it straight away and stuff like that, and kind of starting to realise that actually, it can sort of, it's good enough, if that makes sense, really. It kind of, it's a nice moment to kind of think, well, I've got some music out there and it's on labels and it's promoted and it gets played by sort of big people and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd say that was kind of a bit of like a tick off one of the boxes, if that makes sense to me. So that was always what I wanted to do. So
that's fantastic stuff, isn't it? Yeah.
You've got some recordings as well from
yes. I mean, I've done all sorts of recordings over the years, and plenty of radio work and so on, but organ recordings, And I did a lot of work with a French trumpeter years ago, and we did some broadcasts and so on together as well. And certainly I've been accompanist on all sorts of recordings over the years as well, piano and organ. So great. They're great things to do.
Yes, right.
What else have we got on here?
A favourite composer?
Oh yeah, that's always an interesting one, isn't it? Have you got a favourite composer?
Well, I guess mine's in my classical sort of, if it was kind of purely thinking classical music, I'd probably say Mendelssohn, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I kind of like his songs without words a lot, and I like the kind of very singing lyrical sort of style, actually. I don't know what it is. I think he's got a certain piece. I think most composers probably have this as well, but I can usually always tell a Mendelssohn piece, something like that, some sort of intuition that sort of happens. But so I'd have sort of said Mendelssohn in kind of the classical genre, but I certainly like a lot of film music as well. And whether that's orchestral or not, sort of thing. I like a lot of electronic music as well, but probably in more of the film music, sort of James Horner, who did kind of Titanic and Braveheart, and he did a soundtrack for a film called Legends of the Fall, which I always thought was just really wonderful, effectively. Like even the Titanic soundtrack, I'm a big fan of that. Even though probably people are sick of hearing it, sort of thing, but it's fantastically written stuff. So kind of a lot of the Celtic roots, and perhaps it's more simple in many terms as compared to a classical sort of piece. But I certainly like the very lyrical melody, or something like that, romantic sort of melody. So that's what I perhaps said. What about you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I mean, to pick out one composer is quite a difficult thing to do, isn't it, really? And I mean, certainly when I was a teenager, I used to love the music of Olivier Messiaen, and I still do. And, he wouldn't be in the front line for many people, but I mean, I think he's absolutely stunningly brilliant composer. So I set about learning a lot of his organ pieces, and then the fantastic pieces like Tarangalila Symphony and so on. In fact, when I was a student, I had a great opportunity to go to Paris and spend a bit of time at the Paris Conservatoire and had some lessons with Messiaen. So that was amazing. And I remember going to a talk that he did, which sort of sounded a bit dodgy because it was called Messiaen et ses oiseaux. Messiaen and his birds, which sounds a bit strange in English. But as many people know, Messiaen used to go out and notate birdsong, and then he included all this birdsong in his music. So you hear all these references to birdsong and things. So fascinating, and always been engaged with him. But if I've got a one all-time favourite, it would have to be Johann Sebastian Bach for me. Maybe that's something to do with the organist and the church background as well. But I just think absolutely supreme composer. Always loved it, and the more I get into Bach, the more I discover, and just think he was remarkably ahead of his time. And just wonderful music. So for me, Bach is the number one.
That makes sense. And then I guess that goes on quite nicely to a famous piece.
A favourite piece, well, it sort of ties in for me. If I'm looking at Bach and thinking, what's the all-time favourite for me? The B minor Mass. Absolutely the most incredible piece of music. I mean, most masses are written to be sung liturgically as part of a church service. This one wasn't. It's a huge piece, but it absolutely, for me, shows Bach at his very best. So, you know, yeah, no, that's my big desert island disc, I suppose.
Well,
yeah.
I guess mine sort of don't make sense because mine's not from my favourite composer, but that's just the way it
That's
is.
right. That's right.
I actually really like Elgar's Nimrod, actually. I've always found that. And we recorded the video for that as well.
Yes.
I kind of, again, just like the very sort of lyrical melody almost. I don't know what it is about that sort of style. It's a very... It's just kind of very big and bold and melodic almost, some sense, perhaps traditional, sort of English style as well. So always that piece really, I mean, I suppose you can say some more as well, but
Yeah.
I think that's certainly perhaps up there for me as one of my favourite pieces.
Yeah.
And it's by neither Mendelssohn or James Horner, but...
Never mind. Nothing wrong with Elgar.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So that's your favourite piece. And then you see what everybody asking about your favourite, this, that and the other. So we've done favourite composers, favourite pieces, favourite performer. Yeah, so you've got someone there, have you?
Yes, Wilhelm Kempff. That's it. Or would it be Wilhelm?
Yeah.
Sort of say it like that. I always thought he was very kind of accurate rhythmically, something like that sort of thing. I quite like Horowitz as well. Perhaps like.
I love watching Horowitz play. He's got that sense of I don't really care about what I'm doing.
Yes.
And everything's done with this amazing ease, but it just flows so beautifully.
His interviews are always enjoyable to watch
as
well.
They are, aren't they? Yeah.
And I think the reason was kind of, I remember my granddad, I'd started playing the piano or something like that, and I remember he had lots of old classical discs on a big stereo player, and he had a big sort of fancy TV at the time, and he puts the piece on by Wilhelm Kempff he was playing. And it was quite fascinating. I think he was like 80 or 90 or something at the time. Yet his hands were just so mobile. And I remember my granddad saying, just look how fast his hands are. He's kind of a delicate almost person in age and look, but he's still got that kind of finesse almost, that sort of thing. And in another strange way, he also reminded me, he looks to me very much like my granddad, so I guess some sort of nostalgia in some ways there, when I see him. I think that looks a lot like my granddad actually. I don't know what it is, but that's why.
That's interesting. Because I just think there are so many stunning performers in the world. It is quite difficult to pick out an individual, isn't it? And I suppose one has favourites for all sorts of reasons, like you just said, really. I mean, one of my favourite organ performers was Peter Herford, and he was my teacher while I was at university, and recorded all of the organ music of Bach. So you begin to see a connection here with the favourite composer and so on. And actually, a lot of organists play very accurately and quite mechanically, and Peter Herford is one of those people who's just got innate inner musicianship, and it absolutely sort of comes through in his playing. And but I can think of another organist as well who also really impressed me was another famous French organist, a chap called Jean Langlais, who's no longer with us, unfortunately. But when I had my year at St Paul's Cathedral, he came to give a recital, and I was asked to look after him. And he was blind. So I remember meeting this rather crippled old man who was sort of struggling to shuffle along and couldn't see. And I was thinking, how on earth is he going to do this? And I remember getting him up the stairs to the organ loft there. And he just said to me, put my hand on every single stop on the organ and tell me what it is. Well, you're talking, 250 stops or something? And they're sort of that far apart, So we spent quite some time going to the organ, just saying, this is what this one's called, this is what this one's called. And then I said to him, would you like me to organise the stops for you? What we call do the registration, thinking he's never going to do this. He said, no, I'll be fine. And he just played this thing, and every time he wanted another stop, his hand went out really quickly and he grabbed exactly the right one. And he knew where everything was on just that going through. Incredible kind of memory and capacity.
Quite mind-blowing almost, effectively.
And most people who came who could sing perfectly well struggled to do this because of this huge instrument that you had to live with for so long before you could get around it. And he was amazing. And another guy who was deeply sort of humble as a person and one of the most amazing musicians, and just sort of sat there looking as if he was too frail to do anything.
Yeah.
And then whizzed around this thing like watching somebody at the Olympics, absolutely mind-blowing. So, yeah, and that I've never forgotten that moment,
it's a sort
and
of
I
significant
suppose
moment.
sometimes these moments that you're absolutely in touch with somebody,
it's quite fascinating.
it just affects you for life, really. Yeah. So yeah, another favourite performer. Yeah. So what else? Favourite
chord progression.
Oh, favourite chord progression. Yeah.
Oh, we've got the keyboard for this
Yeah.
one as well.
Oh right. What's your favourite chord progression? That's an interesting one.
Again, mine I suppose has got nothing to do with my favourite piece or composer.
By
or
magic,
anything
a
like
keyboard
appears.
How about that? Yeah.
It's by a film composer though called Thomas Newman.
Yeah.
I think it's very clever with his harmony. And it's from a piece called Ghost. And I don't know the technique would be, but I just sort of labelled it myself as like kind of this space tenths or something like that, space ninths or whatever it was sort of.
Right.
But it's quite simply just some chords and consecutive fifths all over. It kind of does a similar thing as well. Just always kind of, I've liked a lot of that sort of style, and certainly, is it Thomas Tallis as well? Sometimes that sort of
that sort of thing, yeah.
That's always sort of stuck with me. I don't know what it is. I really just like the kind of reflectiveness of it, and the nature is perhaps again very simple,
but simple is often most effective, isn't it? And it's a lovely kind of open texture, that sort of chording, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know the technique or what it'd be, but kind of.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go for something completely different. Why not? And I'm not going to talk about Bach or Messiaen or anybody I've mentioned, but here's a little fragment of Wagner. Well, of course, Wagner wrote these massive, huge scale pieces. But how about Tristan and Isolde? This is just amazing, this chord progression. That's kind of chord progression to die for, isn't it? And I mean, what's going on there? It's incredibly chromatic harmony.
Certainly very different between these two.
Totally different, yeah. I mean, that's one of the great things about us working together, I think. We have kind of similarities, don't we? Certain musical things that we have in common. And we also go in different directions. And that makes for a really creative partnership, I think. Which is good.
Certainly
so there we are. So favourite chords, and what's your favourite washing up liquid? Oh no, that's not on there. Okay, so I think we've done the favourites. Hardest piece you've ever played? Goodness me, yeah. What do you reckon there?
Well, again, probably from my diploma, actually, it'd probably be. I did 2 Scarlatti sonatas. I did the Pathétique sonata. And I did Clair de Lune, which again, sometimes that was kind of one of the pieces, maybe sort of my favourite piano piece in some ways. When I always wanted to play the piano, I thought this is the end goal piece sort of thing. This is the one that I want to do. So I was really glad I did that. But probably I played Stravinsky's Tango as well, which is not the most perhaps common one, or something like that. But I remember enjoying that as well, but kind of particularly hard. There was a lot of big fat chords in it that were sort of easy enough to get around, but kind of at the speed and the rhythm and jumping about.
It needs a lot of agility.
It does. Yeah. I sort of found that quite challenging almost, some senses. So for me, I think it would be that piece.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it's probably some of the contemporary repertoire that I've been asked to play over the years, where people sort of go to town on making something absolutely impossible to play, and then you've got to find a way to make it happen. And sometimes written in very spidery script as well, making it hard to read as well. It just all adds to the fun. So I think some of that. Possibly Liszt. I mean, I absolutely admire the musical Liszt. So things like the piano sonata in B minor, quite a big piece, you know. But I mean, it's not just about technical difficulty. I think actually sometimes playing the simplest pieces really well actually
I know they said
is,
that as well.
is sometimes the most demanding thing. And just very occasionally, I'm extremely moved by something I hear in the exam room when sometimes quite a young musician will play something absolutely beautifully that maybe is not the hardest piece in the world, but it just comes out of their soul,
very good,
and something happens that's miraculous, you know. And so, yeah, maybe it's not always just about technical difficulty,
I
but
don't
that's
think it
certainly
is.
one angle on it. But yeah. Yeah, so anyway, there we go. So the favourite things, the hardest things. Oh, this is an interesting question that came up. Yeah, so, somebody's asked this question. If you could meet J.S. Bach, what would you ask him?
That's quite a good one.
It's an interesting one. I mean, one question that I might be tempted to ask him is, you know, had he ever heard anything about birth control? Because bear in mind, he had 20 kids. So that was quite... And how he managed to get on with his job and compose so much music when he had 20 kids. I mean, you know, there was the first Mrs. Bach, and then she died, then there was another one. And she was quite a bit younger than him, so I suppose they'd managed to keep going. But so she must have had her hands full, really, with all this while he was busy doing his thing. So that could have been one question, but I suppose if I take the question more seriously, which I perhaps ought to do, I think the question I'd ask him, and it's perhaps more a sort of human question than a musical question, is the thing about Bach is that he wasn't at all popular during his lifetime. You know, he was often sort of passed over. People thought he was a bit crazy because they didn't understand the music that he was writing, you know. And he applies for this job in Leipzig, and he's the third choice candidate. You know, they want to give it to other far lesser musicians, and they end up saying, well, I suppose we'll have to have this Bach guy because the other two have turned us down, you know. And so, I mean, my question would be, you know, what is it that kept him going? Because you think most people will think, well, maybe this isn't for me. Just give up.
And ballet dancer or something.
Yeah, do anything else, absolutely. And somehow he just kept going. There must have been some kind of inner conviction that told him that what he was doing was something important. And thank goodness he did, because it's not until 70 years after his death that Mendelssohn, your favourite composer, comes along and starts this fantastic revival of Bach, and then people begin to appreciate him. He's just too far ahead of his day for his contemporaries to have made sense of it. But somewhere he had this inner motivation to keep going and just wrote an incredible volume of music. So I think that probably would be the nature of my question to him. Yeah.
I'd certainly ask him if he fancied making some videos for a channel or something like that.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good, yes. All right, Johann Sebastian, a few videos for Music Matters. What do you reckon? Yeah, that would be something else.
But again, I guess on a more serious thing, what's always fascinated me, whether this answers this question or not, is kind of if you had a composer, say as Bach, something like that, or Vivaldi or anyone sort of thing, and you kind of stuck them in the modern time, would they still write the music they wrote almost in some sense? Would they kind of change? Because, I mean, fair enough, there's music technology in their day. It's kind of, there's still technology to make a violin.
Absolutely.
But now there's perhaps so much more. It's sort of changed the landscape. So I always kind of wonder, would they have done that sort of stuff, or would they have done something different? Or so I kind of like to present something, sort of say, well, this is what music sounds like in the future. What do you think to this, almost, or something, if that's at all possible, and see, does he like it? Does he change his mind? Does he feel influenced by it, or anything like that? Almost, really.
And it poses all those wider questions as well, like, you know, if you're going to play Bach, should you play Bach on the piano? You know, that's not the instrument that he wrote it for.
Like the switched on Bach sort of thing. I think that's a fantastic idea, that sort of thing.
Fantastic, puts it in a contemporary context.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult one, because you can never kind of lift somebody out of the period in which they live and say,
exactly,
well, if he lived 100 years later, would it have been different?
Yeah.
They can only sometimes wonder, I think, what would have happened if somebody had lived longer. You know, somebody like Mozart, you know, who dies very young. You know, if he'd actually lived for twice the time he did, my goodness, what would he have been writing by the end of his life? But it is what it is. A lifespan is what's delivered to us. We make the best of it or not. Anyway, so that's that one. What have we got? Oh, yes. Is there a particular 20th century composer who we think might be particularly significant in years to come. That's a very interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think I'd probably say similar to you. I can see what you're thinking, sort of
Yeah.
thing. But again, more for me, I sort of see kind of the shift to, again, just sort of changing the way music kind of happens almost. Again, the technology sort of thing, and whether it's pop music, rock music, electronic music, film music, as more of a kind of significant shift or something like that. Like this will be a point in history where it was something significant happened, effectively, something like that.
Absolutely.
It's quite amazing. Like a lot of music's influenced by one another, and whether it's electronic music or film music and all that sort of stuff, and classical music as well. Like plenty of musicians influenced still by classical composers. So I sort of wonder what will kind of come about of all that sort of stuff, really. Particular composer, yeah. What do you reckon?
I think it's quite a hard one, actually, but particularly we're talking about the 20th century because, of course, we had this great crisis of tonality in the sort of early 1900s, and different composers go in different directions. So you've got the serial composers with Schoenberg, Berg and Webern, and you've got the neoclassical stuff with Stravinsky, who you've mentioned already. We've got Debussy and Impressionism. We've got the people who just bat on being post-romantics. And then later on, as the century unfolds, well, there are all sorts of new avenues, electronic music, the development of film music. I mean, how do you pick out somebody? And as we've already said about Bach, he wasn't seen as the most significant guy at all during his lifetime. They would have had somebody like Telemann in far greater esteem. And now it's very much the way around. So, I mean, who knows? And it's not always popularity that is going to take the journey. There are lots of composers you could look at now who are popular, but are they going to be the people that folk are talking about and listening to in 100 or 200 years' time? I kind of have a feeling that that maybe Debussy might end up with a slightly special place in all of this.
I agree,
I mean, the Serialists did something quite amazing. But it was kind of very ordered and led to all sorts of developments for beyond serialising the pitch. Boulez and people later do something much more radical. But in a sense, it's kind of logical. And neoclassicism, kind of looking back, rethinking, regenerating things that have already happened in the past, that's logical. But Debussy, it seems to me, is the guy who does something rather radically different and gets interested in kind of colour for its own sake. And that seems to me to have been a big theme as the 20th century has unfolded and continues into the current century. So maybe something that Debussy was primarily responsible for will be a thread, and that becomes the most significant thing. Who knows? Come back and ask me in a couple of 100 years' time. If I'm still here, I'll gladly reappraise that answer. So, that's that.
Right, now we're getting to this sort of thing then. How did Music Matters come about?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean, Music Matters has got a little bit of history, really, to the 21st century. I mean, it's completely transformed.
Even before this as well, really, hasn't it?
Absolutely. It's transformed over where it started. And we started in 2003 when I was working with a colleague, and we were putting on choral events, choral weekends, that kind of thing, and they ran very successfully, and lots of people came to sort of be away from home for a weekend, learn to sing a piece of music, we put on a concert, perform the piece and so on.
I remember visiting a few as well.
Yeah, you've been along,
absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So we did all that for quite a while, but then that sort of moved into another sort of phase of operation. And I remember the day that you said something to me.
I remember it as well.
And you said something about,
the website, wasn't it?
Yeah, you were terribly polite, and you said, that website you've got, it's great, but actually it's not.
Have you ever thought about changing it?
To something that might be more useful? And that's kind of got us started. And you redesigned my website, and it was much more effective.
I think you used to run the grade 5 theory days as well,
study days. We did grade 5 theory study days. We did sight singing days.
And then we just sort of said, kind of, have you thought about maybe recording it or something like that?
Or doing this a different way, doing it online and doing videos and things.
That's how it started effectively, didn't it?
Yeah, so we had a kind of series of conversations about all that, didn't we? And then it sort of got
started
moving.
with the theory and stuff, and then it's kind of gone from there, hasn't it? Sort of thing. We started mainly like just doing courses and putting out videos on YouTube, and then we upped the ante, I guess, sort of thing, didn't we? We did some more courses, and certainly more of the YouTube video.
Yeah, and we've got kind of more drawn into it all as we've got.
It's been good. Yeah, we're glad we set it up effectively.
Yeah. So we've been going at this for, 5-6 years?
I think it has been.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite
I had hair when we started.
It did. You didn't use to wear glasses much as well, did you?
No, absolutely.
We had no problems with glare of lights or anything like that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, needs must.
You'll be the old organist who have to show
that's only a matter of time. So what else? Lots of questions about Music Matters, not surprisingly. So that's kind of where it comes from, isn't it? And its history. That's right. And people are asking about, where does it sit now? I mean, do you want to say anything about where we are now?
Well, I suppose most people can kind of see, can't we? We've got plenty of courses on the website. I think there's 24 and counting sort of thing. There's lots on there. Go check them out. The subscribers, they all build nicely, and all the videos. We run 3 of the Maestro groups. We set up those recently, which is you can click the join button below and become a Maestro and get access to lots of extra perks. Certainly the live streams are really good. We do live teaching, just like a normal video.
We're doing that every month at the moment, aren't we?
Every month, there's a couple of those. People can ask questions and submit compositions and get feedback and anything else musical, really. Sort of some personal feedback and personal inputs. So.
Yeah, it's quite a fun thing to do, isn't it?
One-to-one tuition, that sort of thing as well,
Yeah, that's all kind of part of it, isn't it? If anybody wants individual lessons, they can go onto the website and get all that booked. And in piano or organ or theory or harmony or composition or anything else.
Kind of sequencing and recording and all that sort of thing as well. Yeah, electronic sort of stuff.
If it's tech, ask him. Don't ask me. So I suppose that's sort of where we're at, isn't it? And I mean, the YouTube channel is fascinating as well, isn't it? Because there's lots more kind of sort of interaction going on that now. Lots of people posting comments, asking questions.
Because we didn't know which way to go or anything like that, did we? Sort of thing.
And it's just great that people have got involved in that, and lots of inquiries and questions and reflections, again, coming from all over the world.
Often quite touching as well.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, some of the stuff is really touching because we've got people in parts of the world that are war-torn or very poor, who've written some very moving things to us about how this is keeping them going.
Australian fires and stuff like that.
People involved in the Australian fires recently, and we had a nice one recently, didn't we, from somebody in hospital who said that these videos were keeping her buoyant while she was in hospital. It's slightly worrying. But there we are. So, all sorts of... again, it's that thing, isn't it? You set out to do something musical and there's a kind of human impact beyond the musical and that you don't always kind of gauge until you get this kind of feedback, and then it's really quite amazing, really.
It's always good to hear. We like hearing it. So
and to be in touch with people that otherwise we never would have been. That's fantastic. So that's kind of
and
where
where's
we
it
are.
going in the future, effectively?
Yes. Yeah, where's it going in the future? Well more of the same.
It probably will be, to be fair. We want to develop the YouTube channel more, don't we? Maybe up the ante on that, and certainly put out more courses.
Lots of ideas for courses. It just takes time to do it.
It does, But
definitely
worth the effort. And there's only us two. This is Music Matters.
This is it. This is the total size of the empire.
And of course the memberships, Maestros, feeding them a lot and stuff like that. We'd like to see that grow. But I think ours is kind of what you've dubbed as the all-round musician effect.
It's something I feel really passionately about. there are lots of people out there who can play something, and then maybe when it comes to music exams, if they're going down that route, they've got this thing about, well, I've got to play these pieces, then I've got to learn some scales, and then I've got to sight read something, and then I've got to do these things called aural tests, and then, or somebody wants me to learn some theory. And we sort of see all these as separate compartments. And the big thing for me is actually what we really want is the all-round musician, the person who embraces all of that and integrates it all. It's not just about doing this or about doing that or having to do something to jump through a hoop. It's just about how do we develop the all-round musician. And I think that's at the heart of what we're doing. Trying to resource people and help people to see actually how this is essential to musical life. And that if you do one of these things without the others, then it sort of lacks a balance somewhere, and something might just be impaired in terms of skill somewhere. And we just want to plug those gaps, join things up a bit more.
Because they all help each other effectively as well, don't they?
Completely. So that's definitely part of the ongoing vision for where we are.
It certainly is. Right, what have we got next? What are your individual roles within Music Matters?
Yes.
Well, I think most people kind of know your role, I guess, in some sense, don't they?
It's probably more obvious in a way. I tend to be the guy in front of the camera delivering the stuff usually.
I suppose you're kind of more involved in what we're going to teach and
what's the content,
music side,
planning it, thinking it through, and kind of delivering it.
Certainly, so, and I do more of basically the tech sort of stuff, the website and social media, and kind of editing the videos and putting all that together and sort of setting it up and putting Gareth's microphone on and all that sort of thing. That's it, getting it going,
making sure it always. I'd be completely lost without it. Absolutely.
So that's kind of my main involvement, really. So I guess mine's more the tech side and you're more with the musicianship side. But we do understand each other's sort of...
Oh, we do. Often talk about it all, don't we? And bounce ideas off each other. And that's great. That's a very creative partnership, isn't it? Which is great.
It's good.
What's next? Somebody asking here, well, several people on this sort of area, which books do we recommend for theory, harmony, aural, all this kind of thing? There's certainly loads of good books out there. There's no doubt about that. And, the list is exhaustive, really. But in a funny sort of way, it's something to do with what we're doing at Music Matters, that lots of people actually find it very difficult to learn these things from a book. I mean, if you want to learn aural development, which is about sound and using your ears, how do you learn that from a book?
Exactly.
I mean, the book can explain things, but actually you need to hear it and you need to be hands-on with it, don't you? And
stuff like that.
Harmony, any of these things. And it's one of the things that's kind of really motivated us in this, I think, isn't it? That actually, when you produce the videos about all of these things, I think the reason why lots of people can suddenly relate to it is that the theory is explained in a way in which it would be in a book. But we write it down and demonstrate how to go about doing it.
Yeah, you can hear it with the sound as well.
Yeah, and we hear it, because we try to play what we're talking about. And you can see the keys light up on the screen, so people can relate that to what's actually going on in terms of the specific pitch and so on. So really, it's sort of trying to answer the frustrations that I've heard for years about people reading books.
Visual.
And it's not to decry anything about the books, because there's some fantastic books out there.
Certainly.
But if you pick up a sort of 300-page harmony book and try to work through it, my goodness, you need a lot of grit to survive that. And you don't always kind of make complete sense of it. And so it seems to us this, again, it's part of the all-round musician thing, isn't it? Have it explained, see it written down, hear it being demonstrated, and then you can make this connection and take it from there, and we're really interested in making it as practical as we can, aren't we, really? It's just kind of like, ensuring that any practical musician, whether they're a performer or a composer or someone appreciating music, can kind of use this stuff in a way that's kind of real and practical. So, I'm not sure that answers that question directly.
No,
if we start with a huge list of books, we'd be here all day, and then we'd miss out something that was really good. So
probably
possibly the answer is not to mention any. there's a politician's answer for you. Yeah.
What resources do we provide for graded exams? Well, quite a lot, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose it flows on, doesn't it, from what we've just been saying, you know, the fact that you do have to do sight reading and do oral tests and all these kind of things.
Yeah,
Actually,
scales and
how do you do that? And the reality of this, and we both know this from teaching as well, is that somebody comes for a lesson. By the time you've worked through all the things you need to do, you've got very limited amount of time left in a lesson to do things like oral tests. So maybe it gets slipped in at the beginning or the end, and people need ongoing practice at it, and they need resources to be able to equip them to do it. And so that's very much behind a lot of the courses we've done, isn't it, really? That we've got, you know, for graded exams, we've got oral tests, kind of preparation, provision for that.
And you've been sort of doing this
so
a long time, effectively, haven't you? Sort of thing like...
yeah, I've been teaching this forever and examining it forever as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of helpful to have those sort of insider insights, really, to...
Because we hardly ever script a video, do we, to be fair? We just sort of
True.
plonk a camera up and set you going, and that's
Off
it.
we
So I
go.
think it just comes out naturally, which is really great.
Yes, my wife says she can't stop me talking once I get started. Anyway. So yeah, lots of resources for the graded exams for people who are wanting to be working through those. Lots of different exam systems around the world, of course, which is perhaps worth mentioning. And you know, I work for ABRSM, the Associated Board of the Royal Schools of Music, and we're operational in, I think, 94 countries at the moment, so that's going on all around the world. Lots of other boards as well, but all doing kind of lots of these things in common, because it is all part of the all-round musician development, really.
And there are plenty of those videos on the channel, you can go through and find them, and then the courses are on the website, so visit that one as well, actually.
And there's definitely something we'll be expanding as we go. Yeah, so where have we got to on this list?
What's the best way to compose? How much theory do we need to know in order to compose? Yeah.
Well, you're a composer. What do you reckon?
I think that's kind of, there's many different avenues to that one, and probably think the same, but it's a bit like kind of, some people could tell a good story, but knowing more of the language allows you to sometimes adapt that story and make it perhaps even better, or tell it in a different light. Like, for instance, I might use simple words like, that was very good, something like that, but I could kind of exaggerate into, it was very lavish and marvellous, that sort of thing. If you don't kind of know the language, then it's difficult to almost go to the next step, almost. So I think the theory is very, very useful to know, whether it's relied on all the time. I think some people do and some people don't. There's no real right or wrong say, but I think it's certainly a tool that many musicians should sort of kind of have, and certainly composers as well, sort of thing. Oftentimes, if I want to do something, I think, well, I can't quite maybe see an inspiration, but what about if I try this technique, and then this might kind of throw inspiration on that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That sort of balance between inspiration and technique, if you like. And it almost sort of, you know, it takes both sides of the brain, doesn't it? You know, we know that one side of the brain is creative, imaginative, you know, not just in music, but in everything else. And you have to have those ideas and that imagination in order to create something of some worth. But if you do that without technique, then somewhere it's going to catch you out. And other people have got lots of technique and very little creativity, so they can do something that works, but it doesn't particularly sound original or imaginative. So it's about developing both sides of the brain, really, isn't it? You know, some people got this idea, and it came across in one or two of the questions actually, that maybe if you learn too much theory, it sort of kills your creativity. I don't subscribe to that view at all. I can only suggest, and it's certainly been my experience, and certainly my experience with people that I've taught over the years, that actually the more you equip people and empower them with technique,
I think
the more likely they are to be free to be creative and imaginative
I agree.
produce something of worth. So it's not just a sort of dry, dusty old subject. And the trouble is, theory is often presented like that. And going back to books, you know, we've all in our past been given some, page after page of this thing, trying to make sense of it, thinking, am I ever going to need to know this stuff? actually, I think it's a very exciting topic, being the sado I am. I think it's actually really engaging. And if you really get into it, it's something you can't leave alone, and then it is part of your creative life, and it's liberating. So, yeah, I think, I'm not saying that you couldn't possibly write something without theory knowledge. Of course you can. But if you have the knowledge, well, it's just going to expand what you do, make you even better at it. Yeah.
Let's have a look. So, can anyone be a musician?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it?
How do we get people to stick with music and develop without giving up or getting bored?
Yeah.
Can anyone develop aural skills? And
Yes, it's a big question, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I remember having a conversation with an examiner colleague some time ago, and this chap was just sort of feeling a little bit frustrated with it all, and sort of saying, well, thousands of people come along and take music exams, and most of them are okay.
Yeah.
Some of them are not, and some of them are better.
Yeah.
And occasionally you hear somebody who you think they've got it. And his question to me was, well, actually, how many of these people are going to end up being professional musicians? And of course, the truthful answer is not many.
Not many, yeah,
not
exactly.
many. But is that the point? Does it matter? I mean, music has such a significant place in people's lives once they've engaged with it. Whether you're just somebody who listens to music, or whether you play it, whether you write it, whether you do a combination of those things. It's such a fantastic thing to be engaged in. So in that sense, it seems to me, can anyone be a musician? Yes. Kind of, can anybody be a top professional musician?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I'd agree.
Does it matter?
Slightly.
And I certainly work with people, and I know you do as well, who get a huge amount of pleasure out of music, and they're not aspiring to be professional musicians.
But they kind of get there, as long as they've got the will to put the work in, I'd have said, sort of thing. That's kind of the key thing.
That's critical. Yeah.
Like anything, I suppose, if you work kind of hard enough at it and put some time into it, then...
Absolutely. I've also worked with so many people over the years who probably are not the most able musicians, but get so much out of it. And it's sometimes the great thing about working with amateurs, experience that in sort of the choir situation a lot, where people who don't read music or not really quite sure what's going on just love to come and sing, make music, be with other people, be part of the team, maybe things that you could do if you were part of a sports team or something as well. But actually, they are musicians. I mean, it would be ridiculous to suggest that they're not musicians. So, that's what I mean by, can anyone be a musician? Well, yes, in that sense. It's just a question of, where you want to be with it and what you're aspiring to be. And maybe the biggest frustration is the people who desperately want to be top-notch professional musicians, and no matter how hard they work, somewhere they haven't got it in them. And that's a tough one. But it always strikes me as a sort of funny thing as well, that it's often said, isn't it? People say, well, what's the point in doing music if you're not going to be a top concert pianist? But no one's ever said, what's the point of going into banking unless you're going to be the governor of the Bank of England? It's actually perfectly okay, isn't it, to work at any point in the banking structure. Not just banking, it could be anything else, couldn't it? And similarly, there's a place for everybody in the world of music, it seems to me. So, can anyone be a musician? Definitely. Yes. And this one, you've sort of covered this, haven't you? How do we get people to stick with music and develop? I mean, the most important thing is people have to be enthusiastic about what they do. I mean, sometimes it can be a bit desperate, can't it, when parents make young children come for music lessons because they think it will be good for them. Actually, if there's no kind of inner enthusiasm for that, sometimes it develops, and that's the great challenge of teaching, isn't it? Just think, well, here's somebody who's here because they've been dragged along by a parent, and now can we inspire them and enthuse them? And when it works, it's great. Sometimes it doesn't work. And
it always quite amazes me. Sometimes you get students who you think, no way, these are going to carry it on, and then they sort of surprise you and they come for years and they really get into it, like you say, and then some think these are definitely on with it and sort of
and there comes
maybe it's not for me.
Significant moment like you've talked about in your own story, and actually, that significant moment changed the whole world for you. So you got to hang on to that. But I think the important thing is that we have to exude our own enthusiasm for what we're doing, because that is infectious. And actually, if you're teaching somebody and you look bored and disengaged, so will they be.
Yeah.
You know, it's hugely important, isn't it? That you're enthusing people, and then they want to be part of that.
Yeah. Can anyone develop oral skills? I guess it's more of kind of like ear skills and notating pitch, that sort of thing.
That's an interesting one, and in many ways, a slightly harder one. You know, you hear stories from people, don't you, about I'm tone deaf, and you say, well, why do you think you're tone deaf? Well, when I was 7, somebody at school told me I'm tone deaf and told me to shut up and not to sing. And they're not tone deaf because they're speaking with intonation in their voice. So they know something about
naturally
pitch.
Goes
it's
up and
naturally
down,
there,
you know. Yeah.
And some people in the world are tone deaf. That's a reality, but very few. From that point,
I've met anyone who ever is.
Yeah, it's
I'm
a
sure
very
they're
rare
awesome,
thing.
yeah.
Very rare thing. And then from there, can you develop oral skills? Well, there's no doubt some people have natural oral skills and do very well with it. Other people have to work hard at it. Other people can play perfectly well, but actually it's not their strongest point. But then oral skills, kind of mean so many different things. It's pitch skills, it's rhythm skills, it's musical perception skills, it's memory skills come into it sometimes, and sometimes people have got perfectly decent oral skills, but they're not got very good memory skills, or that they're better at certain aspects of it than others. I mean, all you can do is work at it, and it is worth doing that. But I think sometimes maybe the reality is there's a kind of ceiling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What can be achieved, and it's about achieving your ceiling.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's wise. That's it. And then I suppose this is a question more for you, this one. How long did it take you to become fluent in harmony and counterpoint?
Yeah, that's
so I won't say I'm not fluent yet. But
how long is a piece of string, really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lifelong engagement, isn't it? And you keep developing your skills. You never stop developing your skills.
Because you still write stuff now.
Absolutely, and you keep learning as you go, don't you? I mean, in terms of my personal story, very much the organist thing, really. That, at a very young age, I think I started playing for services in churches when I was 10. Seems ridiculous now. But
slave labor.
That's terrific. But you very quickly realise that, you've got to improvise. There are places in services where there has to be some organ music that fills in. And you think, well, how do I do this? And so you kind of learn to do it sort of off the cuff, really. And I'm sure my first attempts were absolutely ghastly. But you begin to develop those skills, and then you think, well, can I do this chordally? Can I do it with more counterpoint and so on? And it's a great way to learn it because you start by doing something practical, and then going back to this earlier thing, you learn the theory that goes with it, and then your skills improve, and you analyse counterpoint, harmony, and all the rest of it, and you play it, you read the books, you study the courses, you go for lessons, all these things gradually empower you. So it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
But it's always something I've enjoyed doing, I have to say. And I love the challenges at university. I remember one thing we had to do in the last year was a 5-part 16th century counterpoint exercise, and we had to write 100 bars in 3 hours.
Wow.
And I remember the tutor saying, but nobody's expecting you to write 100 bars, we give you 100 bars, you get as far as you can, and you won't be penalised. And of course, that was a challenge to me. I thought, I'm going to do the 100 bars. But I really worked at it, and I managed to knock off 100 bars in 3 hours.
Nice job.
So I suppose, it depends how driven you are to do that kind of thing. But I just loved it. And even music students I was with and didn't particularly love that. But there you go. But for me, terrific stuff. Again, it's the same old thing. What are your musical enthusiasms? That's going to help motivate you in those areas. This is definitely one of them, isn't it? Oh yeah, there's a specific now. How does one become an ABRSM examiner? So we're back with this again, the music exams, and ABRSM is the body that I've worked for
an examiner
for decades.
And all that sort of stuff, moderator.
I've done all sorts of things with them. Yeah, so an examiner and training new examiners.
Travel the world.
Traveling the world, absolutely. Moderating examiners, making sure we've got consistent standards and doing presentations all over the world for, in places where we've started exams or helping teachers to develop their skills and so on. and looking after teams of examiners in the Far East when we've gone out there with large teams. So yeah, it's been a fantastic career for me with all of that in itself. But anyway, to answer the question, how does one become an examiner? Well, you apply in the way that you might do for any other job, really. There's an applications procedure, and you can get hold of that fairly easily by going online and finding it. The references are taken up, there's an interview, and if all that goes successfully, you go on a training course. And where you kind of put through your paces and train to do it. if all that works out well,
you might even come across you.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, you look out for that one. And if that goes well, and folk go out into the real exam room and have 4 days working with a trainer examiner, kind of just sort of getting up to speed with it live in that situation, then the whole thing's reviewed again at the end of all of that. And so of the sort of original pool of applicants, a much smaller proportion of people will then go on and be part of the examiner
I wonder
panel.
if they're sort of thinking, what sort of stuff do you need to become one as well, like in terms of
what skills do you need?
That sort of stuff. The skills.
Well, obviously some kind of musical pedigree. And the great thing about the examiner panel is that it's not intended that people would be full-time examiners. They're all people who work in the profession as performers, conductors, teachers, composers, whatever they do, and they spend some of their life offering for examining. And so it sits in a professional context. So we've got this fantastic sort of variety of people involved on the examiner panel. Keyboard skills are pretty important.
Yep, they are.
So you have to be able to play oral tests and things and deliver them accurately. And general all-round musical skills. And the ability to be sort of adaptive, really, and we have to examine every instrument up to grade 8. So whether it's your instrument or not doesn't matter, but you have to be flexible enough to be able to embrace that, and it's all criteria based. It's a very objective approach to examining, which is funny in a way. Going back to an earlier thing we were talking about, music is subjective, but it is also objective. So there are objective criteria. So people who want to be examiners need all those musical skills, but they've got to be able to have these assessment skills as well, and to be able to write something that's a realistic appraisal of what's been heard, and to be able to mark it accurately. And so it's a whole kind of combination of skills. And if it isn't right for some people, it doesn't mean that they're any lesser of a musician. There's some absolutely fantastic musicians I've met over the years who maybe haven't quite got the right skill set to be an examiner, and that's fine. But most people who go through the process actually find that even the process is really engaging and good professional development in itself. So yeah, that's something of the nuts and bolts of how that works. I hope that sort of answers the question. Yeah.
Do you teach music online? Yes, we do, don't we? We're both teachers, both got students online and kind of private lessons, stuff like that, locally. That sort of thing. You would certainly do a lot of online teaching as well, don't you?
Well, yeah, it's certainly something that's developed for me in recent years, really. I mean, I've spent years teaching people who live within a reasonable radius of where I operate. And now it's fantastic being able to work with people all over the world. Work with people from lots of different countries. And some of them are doing playing, but a lot of people are doing harmony, theory, composition,
perhaps
arranging.
stuff which is not more commonly taught.
And I think there seems to be a kind of demand for all that kind of stuff. And so that's great. And working with people doing lots of exciting and different things.
On the maestros things, that's pretty much live teaching, isn't it? We kind of set that up almost. So we get a group of people, they're all members, and they can have composition feedback and mark questions, ask questions, anything they want. We can give demonstrations. So that's kind of my teaching we run every month, isn't it, effectively?
It is, isn't it? And the whole online world has opened up all sorts of opportunities for people to tap into what we can offer if they want to. So, yeah, absolutely.
And then, this is an interesting one as well.
Isn't it just?
What should beginners do to play the piano in a week?
Yeah, you can see why we left this one at almost the end. Yeah, very interesting question. And actually, I think what's important about this question is, there are things you could do in a week, aren't there?
Certainly, yeah.
And And actually, if you go on YouTube, there are lots of opportunities, aren't there, to watch somebody play, I don't know, the theme music from Titanic or whatever it is they want to learn. And by watching it a zillion times and copying it, you know, well, you could learn how to play that particular tune.
Yeah.
You know, is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not.
No.
Is it really about learning to play the piano, or is it just
play that
learning to
piece.
play that piece? And I think actually the reality is if you want to learn the piano, you're not going to do it in a week.
It certainly takes a lot longer than perhaps people realise.
much
As with
bigger
anything
job.
as well, isn't it?
Anything that's worth doing is going to take a lot longer than that. So there are certainly things you could learn in a week from scratch. I wouldn't necessarily saying that you're going to learn to play the piano in a week, but you could learn to play something. And some people just want to do that. Great, fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not knocking it at all. But I think, you know, if you're going to do it, and it's a longer journey.
Yeah, and that's part of what we're about in some senses. Like, there's kind of lots of, you know, learn 500 songs in a week, something like that. I've never touched keyboard. And it's just, for me, I would have said it's not really possible. If that makes sense.
I think it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
And we live in
sort of do some bits, but
and we live in a world of sound bites as well, don't we? And you know, and again, it's sometimes very useful to say, you know, here are 5 tips for whatever it is.
Yeah.
But if you see things that are, these are the 3 things you need to know to be a concert
from
pianist,
nothing to
actually, I'm not sure that's at all realistic. It looks inviting, but probably not.
and that is kind of where we've gone again with the all-round musician. We didn't really see many channels that were kind of about, let's approach this very in-depth and a more thorough perspective. And it takes longer, but it's perhaps more thorough, effectively.
I completely agree.
And that's really what we're about, aren't we? Effectively,
it's about breadth and it's about depth. And if you're going to do this really well, that's what it's about.
We're trying to provide resources on the channel or on the maestros, on the website. Certainly, like kind of. Because I remember, like, well, Gareth teaches it really well, as I'm sure everyone knows. That sort of thing is still amazing to watch now. But you're natural at just kind of doing it, and you've got all that experience at sort of like teaching it and, you know, living it, all those all your stories you've got and everything like that. You've been the examiner, you've been a student, all that sort of thing. We're kind of really trying to put together some fantastic resources that or really sort of bring about the next generation of very good musicians, sort of thing.
Absolutely. And it's such an exciting thing to be part of.
It is, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're coming towards the end of our time, but here's an interesting one to finish with. People asking about any particularly significant moment or any particularly funny moments that you kind of recall. I can think of quite a few, but I wouldn't want to broadcast them. But
well, I think for me, yes, there's certainly some. But I remember the Debussy piece, Claire de Lune, was always the one I sort of thought was the one I wanted to play, sort of thing. As I played it, and that was one of the pieces I put together as my program for my diploma. And that was the piece I always thought I played the best, something like that, probably because I enjoyed it the most as well, sort of thing. And never saw anything bad happening with that or anything like that. We took it for a few outings and it was all fine. That was probably the best one. And then it got to the actual diploma, and when I did the exam, I played the other 3 pieces perfectly, and that was the only one in the end in which I managed to mess up an entire bar or something like that. You just think of all that kind of surety of that piece. Typical, that's the one that goes, but it kept going in anyway, so that is what it is. But I'd say that's one that particularly stands out for me.
Often happens in performance, though, isn't it? The things you're worried about, and you go, okay. The things you're not worried about, that's where it's going to go wrong. It has happened to me on a number of occasions, that one, Yeah, I don't know about any particularly kind of sort of funny moments. I mean, I remember judging a music festival once, and there's this man of a certain age, shall we say, was singing in this vocal class, and they all had to present their scores to me at the beginning of this thing before they sang. And he came to the table where I was working, and he gave me a score of the piece that he was singing. And he just leant over and he said, "I've changed the words and I've changed the notes. Otherwise, it's the same." So I thought, okay, what was the point of giving me a score? But anyway, so that was a sort of one of those sort of funny moments, really. And then I can remember many things that have happened in the exam room, but I remember a guitarist coming along once. You were talking about playing the guitar, and we have to find out which pieces they're going to play. And anyway, this lad said to me, "I'm going to begin by playing First Wardrobe," and I thought, now that is such a strange title for a piece. First Wardrobe, and I was looking through the syllabus thinking, what could this be?
Yeah,
I've never heard of this piece. Yeah, and in the end I said, well, I'll just come and have a look at your music to see which edition you're playing from, so it sounded as if I'd on it. And when I went to have a look at his music, it had a title. It was in French, and it said Premier Amour. And I suddenly realised what he'd done. He probably didn't want to speak French to me, he got the dictionary out the night before, and he must have looked up Premiere first, okay? Then he must have looked up amour, love, but instead of which he must have found armoire, which must have been close by in the dictionary. So this piece that was supposed to be called First Love, he thought was First Wardrobe. And so, of course, it didn't have any love in it at all, really. And he gave us this rather clinical performance. So it was quite tempting to write, a rather wooden performance that came unhinged in a few chords. Anyway, I resisted that temptation. But I just love those sort of moments where somebody does it with all seriousness, as if a piece of music would be called First Wardrobe.
There's probably one out there, maybe.
Yeah, well, who knows? Yeah, there's a thought. Somebody could write a piece of music called First Wardrobe, and then it will really exist. Yeah, but I think probably, I suppose this is one of these things that's funny to look back on, but it was slightly scary at the time when this vicar got in touch with me as this priest and said, would you be able to come up to the church on Wednesday afternoon and play the organ for a wedding? And I thought, short notice and slightly unusual to have a wedding in the middle of the week, but anyway, things happen. So anyway, so I turned up, and the organ in this church was sort of tucked round the corner. You couldn't see very well. But anyway, I got there in good time. I started playing some very jolly music because it was a wedding. You want jolly music at a wedding, and I was all set to play "Here Comes the Bride." And the signal in this church was there was a light that flashed. So when the light flashed, you'd set off. You say, "Great." Anyway, I'm seconds away from the light flashing and playing the bridal march, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw the funeral directors who came to put the trestles that they were going to put the coffin on. And I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, this is not a wedding. It's a funeral. And we were seconds away from the coffin being carried into church with all the mourners, with me going, "Here comes the bride." I've relived that moment on numerous occasions.
Yes, many nightmares.
Many years ago. So there we are. It all happens in the life of a musician, is all you can say, isn't it, really? Yeah. Well, there we are.
Gets to the end of that.
We've tried to cover as many questions as we can. I hope that's not been too long and tedious for you. I hope it's been interesting. And I hope it's at least given some answers to the questions that you've raised. And as we said at the beginning, if we've not covered your question, don't panic. It's probably going to appear as a YouTube video or as a Music Matters course.
We've got them all, yeah.
We've got them all written down, ready to go. And we literally had so many questions. It was
it was
completely wonderful and almost overwhelming. And questions from all over the world, from lots of
eggs and bacon
people.
Or something.
All sorts of people with fascinating names. Absolutely. So brilliant. Anyway, been great to spend this time with you and with each other as well.
Yes.
Enjoy everything that the musical world has to offer you, and we hope that Music Matters is of some use to you along the way as well. So bye for now.
Bye-bye.